Instead of saying, for example, that I'll let my name stand, I'm saying I'm running.
This isn't like those other campaigns.
What's your vision for changing the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod?
We need a change in our church, a change of tone, a change of culture.
So my question, how do you win the hearts and minds of the median LCMS member when it comes to racial justice topics, like championing them, making others realize it's important and that racism in the LCMS is a reality?
This is, I think, an extraordinary question, and it goes, I suspect probably Sherry, you and others would have even better insights into that than I might.
We need to be driven by our hopes and not by our fears. And my fear is that we are not being driven by our hopes, but more by our fears. I'm concerned about, there's so much anger in our culture and so much polarization that has kind of carried over into our church life.
So this is Dave Benke. Hi, Pat. My example is that the Missouri Synod was, and most people don't know this, but was the most prominent Protestant denomination in the United States in affordable urban housing for poor people, Black and brown people, for a good number of years. I was there, I was involved in it, and we started something at the national level. And the Missouri Synod 3 years ago decided to shut it down.
I think in the case that you mentioned, the thing that would concern me is this increasing narrow, as oxymoronic, this narrowing of what we do and what we can do and what's acceptable for us to do and who we can work with, and to the point where there's just nothing much we can do, and there's no creativity, there's no vision for maybe beyond a certain kind of identity that one associates with the kind of just the most narrow definition of orthodoxy.
And I get really uncomfortable too when sometimes we juxtapose Lutheran as if it were in some kind of contrarian position to Christian, right? Lutheran identity can become rather sectarian, but I think it's perfectly fine to emphasize our rich history and heritage. We stand on the shoulders of giants, for sure, but they would not have us only looking back and trying to preserve sort of these icons of the past, but to say, take what is good and reach out in a completely different world than the one that they might have encountered. You can sort of write off and say, well, the Lord has called us to this kind of ministry. To just reach out to people of Germanic heritage in the Midwest? And Billy Graham was saying, when it came to outreach, that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod was the sleeping giant. And now I think we're just sleeping. We're asleep at the wheel. I'd like us to have a future where we recognize that in our church, which, by the way, the differences among us are microscopic compared to what's going on all around it. We just blow them way out of proportion.
I'm going to read a comment that's in the chat here and then ask a really specific question. It is spiritually very difficult to take communion when there are self-identifying neo-Nazis taking communion in our churches without recourse, while our synod stance is to largely fence out non-LCMS Lutherans from the table. Very tangibly, is the synod willing, and would you be willing as president, to Matthew 18 with racists in our churches? It feels we are, as a synod, giving them many passes in the name of both sidesism without considering the spiritual implications of that on our BIPOC members, neighbors, and others in the church. Would you be willing as president to Matthew 18 with racists in our churches?
Yeah, I certainly would.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to say that I've never worked for the LCMS, but I am a lifelong LCMS member. I'm a professor. I work for a large retail company for corporate, and we take specific steps into dismantling racism, into doing specific workshops that show how to undo some things, how to be more welcoming to the BIPOC community. And I'm just curious, with your wonderful, I think you've done so much good work. I'm not at all trying to discount that, but I think of what could Concordia do? What could the average church do? What could the mega churches do? Because I think there's a lot that can be done.
I think you're right. And I think that maybe sometimes when questions have come to me during this campaign, they have been, what will we do? And I don't know exactly everything that I might do.
But one question that keeps coming up, and again, this is something that's emailed very regularly and is coming up in the chat now, for people who are disheartened, whether they be Lutherans of color, students of color, or anyone in the church that might be discouraged by some of these conversations or lack of progress on these issues. Why stay in the LCMS? Why stick with it? Why stay in our schools? Do you have any words of hope, or what keeps you going?
Well, yeah, great question. And there are times when I'm very discouraged and disheartened too. In some ways, Winston Churchill said, what did he say? The democracy is the worst system of government imaginable, except for all the others, right? In some ways, I feel that way about the Missouri Synod.